Your history books claim the battery was invented in 1800, but a dusty relic found in the sands of Iraq suggests we've been lied to for centuries. Think back to your middle school science class, right? You were likely taught that Alessandro Volta was the father of the electrical age, credited with creating the first chemical battery at the turn of the 19th century. It's a clean, comfortable timeline of human progress. But what if I told you that nearly 2,000 years before Volta was even born, someone was already playing with the fundamental forces of the universe? In 1936, just outside of Baghdad, workers stumbled upon a discovery that should not exist. Buried in the ruins of an ancient settlement was a modest, 5-inch tall clay jar. At first glance, it looks like something you'd find in any museum's basement. Simple, unremarkable pottery. But when researchers looked inside, the mystery deepened into something far more provocative. Inside that clay shell sat a copper cylinder, capped with an iron rod that showed clear signs of acid corrosion. The components were held in place by a plug of asphalt, the same waterproof bitumen used in ancient construction. To a casual observer, it's an odd collection of scrap metal. But to an electrical engineer, the blueprint is unmistakable. It is a galvanic cell, a battery. I want you to really consider the implications of this. We are taught that the ancient world was a place of muscle, fire, and stone. But here, held in the palm of a hand, is a device that defies 2 millennia of established technological history. Why would a civilization from the Iron Age need a power source? I mean, what were they doing with a current in a world that supposedly had no use for it? The official story is that these were just storage vessels for scrolls. But that explanation feels like a desperate attempt to ignore the impossible. I've looked at the evidence, and the more I see, the more I realize that the primitive label we've slapped on our ancestors might be the biggest cover-up of all. I'm going to take you deeper into this investigation, because the true shock comes from what happens when we stop looking at this as a relic and start treating it like a tool. Later in this video, I'll show you a modern experiment that proves this jar isn't just a piece of pottery, it's a functional machine. When we poured a simple liquid into a perfect replica, the results didn't just create a spark, they shattered every historical narrative we've ever been told. The question isn't whether it works. The question is, what else were they hiding in the dark? For decades, the official narrative has been simple. The mastery of electricity is a modern triumph. It is a milestone we have claimed for the 18th and 19th centuries, a line in the sand that separates us from the so-called primitive world. I have seen how mainstream historians have fought tooth and nail to keep that line exactly where it is. To them, the artifact found at Kujit Rabu isn't a breakthrough, it's an inconvenience. When you look at the Baghdad Battery through the lens of academia, they will tell you it is nothing more than a humble storage vessel. They claim the copper cylinder was meant to protect papyrus scrolls, and the iron rod was merely a structural support. To the skeptics, the fact that these specific materials, when combined with a simple acid, create a measurable electric current is just a happy accident. A coincidence of preservation, they say. A random assortment of ancient junk that just happens to look like a modern galvanic cell. But I have to ask, why are they so desperate to ignore the physical evidence staring them in the face? I mean, if you were looking for a way to store delicate scrolls, why would you seal the jar with airtight asphalt? Why use 2 specific metals that sit on opposite ends of the electrochemical scale? It feels less like a coincidence and more like a calculated dismissal, designed to protect a fragile timeline. The truth is, admitting the Baghdad Battery works would mean rewriting the textbooks from page 1. It would mean acknowledging that the Dark Ages weren't so dark after all. Because if we admit that a 3,000-year-old civilization understood the flow of electrons, then everything we think we know about human progress starts to crumble. And that is the real danger. If the experts are wrong about this one jar, what else have they tucked away in the basement of a museum, labeled as ceremonial or decorative, just to avoid asking the hard questions?
They want you to believe the past was silent and primitive. But as I am about to show you, the evidence suggests a world that was far more illuminated than they are willing to admit. Because when we took these random materials and put them to the ultimate test, we didn't just find a spark. We found a secret that was never meant to be rediscovered. I knew the theory was dangerous. I mean, if these clay jars were truly batteries, it would rewrite every textbook on your shelf, right? So researchers did what the skeptics feared most. They built a mirror image. They took a simple clay pot, a copper cylinder, and an iron rod, the exact materials found in the sands of Kujurabu. But there was no lithium or modern acid here, you know? To truly test the past, I had to look at what was available in a world long before the steam engine. I'm talking about the mundane, the things you'd find at an ancient dinner table. Fermented grape juice, lemon juice, plain, simple vinegar. When that liquid hit the copper, the atmosphere in the lab shifted. You could almost feel the weight of centuries pressing against the glass. And then it happened. The needle on the voltmeter didn't just twitch, it climbed. Half a volt, maybe more. It seems small to us today, but in a world of candlelight and stone, this was nothing short of a miracle. The artifact wasn't a decoration. It was breathing. It was alive with a measurable electric current. Think about the gravity of that for a moment. A jar filled with common vinegar, sitting on a workbench, was generating power 2,000 years before Alessandro Volta was even born. But this discovery only pulls the veil back further, revealing a much deeper, darker question. If a Parthian craftsman or a high priest could summon a spark from a jar of juice, what were they actually doing with it in the shadows of their temples? If you think they were just trying to light up a room, you're only seeing the surface. Because there was one detail everyone missed. A tiny clue hidden in the chemical residue of the original jars that suggests this wasn't about light at all. It was about a deception so perfect, it would have looked like pure magic to anyone standing in the room.
I want to take you back to 1936, into the humid, dust-choked basement of the Baghdad Museum. Intrigued, a German archaeologist named Wilhelm Koenig is digging through crates of miscellaneous finds. You know, the stuff everyone else ignored, when he pulls out a small, unassuming clay jar. Reflective. For decades, the academic world dismissed these as nothing more than storage vessels for old papyrus scrolls. But when I look at what Koenig found inside, the scroll jar theory doesn't just crumble, it vanishes. Low, serious tone. Inside that 5-inch jar sat a cylinder made of hammered copper. Inside that cylinder was a single iron rod held in place by a plug of asphalt. Pointing out the significance, if I told you to build a battery today using only ancient materials, this is exactly what you would construct. It's a classic galvanic cell. Engaging. When you fill that jar with an electrolyte, something as simple as lemon juice or vinegar, a chemical reaction occurs. Electrons begin to flow from the iron to the copper. Firmly. This isn't just a theory, right? Modern replicas have proven it works. These jars produce about 1 volt of electricity. Now, you might think 1 volt is nothing. You can't power a smartphone with that. But I found the evidence that proves the Parthians weren't just trying to light up the dark. They were doing something much more lucrative. Investigative. In the same region where these batteries were discovered, archaeologists unearthed jewelry that defied explanation. To the naked eye, it looks like solid gold. But when I look under a microscope, the truth is revealed. Emphasis. These pieces are actually made of silver, covered in a layer of gold so thin and so perfectly applied that it could only have been done through electroplating. Thought-provoking. Think about the implications. We are taught that electroplating was a breakthrough of the 19th century. Yet here I am, looking at 2,000-year-old trinkets that use the exact same process. Measured. This jar wasn't a ritual object or a fluke of history, it was an industrial tool. The ancients weren't just stumbling upon sparks in the dark, they were mastering a hidden science to create miracles of gold that would have left the common person in absolute awe.
They were running a secret industry right under the noses of history. But that's not even the craziest part, because while gold plating was a clever use of this power, there was evidence of a much darker, much more dangerous application for this ancient current, one that was kept hidden within the inner sanctums of the priesthood. Grand atmospheric tone. Think about the implications for a moment, won't you? If the ancients were harnessing the power of the electron while the rest of the world was allegedly still banging walks together, I have to ask, what other modern secrets are still buried in the desert sands? And more importantly, why is this truth being kept in the shadows? For centuries, you and I have been told a very specific story. It's a story of linear progress. The idea that we started as cavemen, moved to bronze, then iron, and finally reached the pinnacle of the digital age. But the Baghdad Battery shatters that neat little timeline. It suggests that our ancestors weren't just surviving, they were experimenting with the very fabric of the physical world in ways we are only now beginning to admit.
It makes me wonder, how much of our collective memory has been systematically erased or rewritten to fit a narrative that keeps us feeling like the most advanced beings to ever exist. Every time a forbidden artifact like this is pulled from the dirt, it's dismissed by the mainstream as a fluke, a ritual object, or a curiosity with no purpose. And I don't believe in flukes. I believe in lost chapters. I believe in a history that is far more complex and perhaps, dare I say, far more electric than the textbooks care to acknowledge. Maybe we aren't the first to master the world. Maybe we're just the latest civilization to wake up in a house built by giants, wandering through the dark and trying to figure out how the lights work. I leave you with this one haunting thought. Are we truly the most advanced civilization to ever walk this earth? Or are we just picking up the broken pieces of a forgotten electrical age? If you're ready to look past the polished lies of the mainstream, subscribe and join me. I'm going to keep digging into the forbidden files of history, one secret at a time. Until next time, keep your eyes open